Welcome to Book Time with Ryan. I am Gnomon, and today we'll be talking about Nick Harkaway's Gnomon. I hope that's the way it's pronounced, because every time I try to say it, I think of this.
Mana.
I have talked about Nick Harkaway before, and I have said that every time I've done a review of one of his books, it has been so complicated that it's daunting to try to do a review. I love them. I gave this 5 stars, but it's just so hard to actually summarize what happens. For this book, I think I overthought it. I probably overthought it. When I got to the end, I had an idea of what I thought was the ending, but I also was not confident that it wasn't something else. Which goes to show you that this is going to be a confusing review, and I'm sorry. I was not confident in not my understanding of the story, but I think it's done in a way that it can be left open to so much interpretation at the end. And I will try to talk about it. I watched 3 minutes of somebody's review, and then I didn't want to watch anymore because I thought it might ruin my approach. I'm going to try to distill it in a way that I think would be the mainstream interpretation, and then I want to discuss what I thought could have been an alternate interpretation. And I will tell you that while I was reading this, I changed what I thought was happening probably 10 times, which for me is a lot. So, look at the cover. There's a shark fin, a dorsal fin for a shark. What happens in this book? We're basically in a future London. I'm not exactly sure of the time frame, but it's past where we currently live, time-wise. What you'll find in this book is that time is pretty relative, and that there's a lot of jumping around in narratives, there's a lot of jumping around in the time frame, and that's just part of the story too. So, this is either a dystopian future of London, or it is a utopian. I think it starts off seeming to be a utopian approach to London. But as we go further and further in this book, we realize that things are not as they seem, and it may be dystopian. It starts pretty quickly. We're following an investigator, and her name is Maliki Knife. Maliki Knife. And I'm going to call her Knife. When you think of this book, it feels a little bit like a mix of Minority Report and Inception, kind of. And actually, that's part of the reason it's hard to talk about, because think about if you saw Inception, you tried to describe what was going on. Now, instead of making that a 2-hour movie, make it a 688-page book that I'm reading somewhere between 20 and 100 pages a day, but it still takes me a while. And then trying to piece everything together. It's going to be difficult. So in this future London, it's really, people have sacrificed some freedom for protection. It's called the system, but the system also has kind of a crime detection, investigative component called the witness. And the witness is looking into an interrogation that went wrong. A woman named Diana Hunter was being investigated. She was being interrogated, a fairly aggressive interrogation where they were tapping into her mind and basically downloading her memories. And during that process, Diana Hunter died. And Knife is the inspector who has been charged with investigating what happened, if there was any wrongdoing, really what went wrong, because this should not have happened. Someone should not die from an interrogation. Knife starts downloading her memories, really parts of this interrogation. She's getting chunks of Hunter's memories, her brain, basically. And she's basically experiencing them as if they were her own memories, but she's doing this in the little blocks of time just to make it manageable. And she's really trying to figure out if Hunter had something that was worth protecting, if that's why she pushed back so hard. Also, Did members of Witness do anything wrong in their interrogation of Hunter? Did they push her too hard? That kind of thing. So she's reviewing all that. We start having multiple narratives. There's a narrative involving a Greek man named Constantine. There's a narrative of two Ethiopian people, a grandfather and his granddaughter, and their names are difficult to say. The granddaughter's name is Annabelle. Both of their last names is Bekele. There's also a woman from the Roman Empire, and her name is Athenas. And then finally there's a character called the Gnomon. And he is depicted, or it is depicted as a shark. So we're introduced to these different characters at different times. And the book alternates, almost like chapters are one person's point of view, which it picks up by the end, and we're seeing multiple points of view in single chapters as they kind of come together, as you start realizing how they interact with each other. All of these stories, which seem to be happening in different timelines and possibly different, maybe multiverses, all of these stories interact in some way. There's some kind of overlap. And the overlap, where they can all kind of come together, it seems, is this thing called the Chamber of Isis. And it is something that was made up by the alchemist Athenas as a joke, really just to kind of screw somebody over, but it was taken seriously. And at some point, this Chamber of Isis came into existence. But she couldn't understand why it would have come into existence because she thought of it. All the other narratives have some kind of moment where they also interact with the Chamber of Isis. And then eventually they all interact with each other. And there is a common thread of characters between them, or occurrences, like Baliki. The grandfather is a painter. He paints something with a shark in it. Eventually, Constantine becomes very rich because he is basically infected with a god that is named Gnomon and is a shark. And through that experience, he sees fours moving across his trading screen. He's a trader, I believe, an investment banker. And he sees fours moving across the screen, and those fours indicate that something's about to happen in the market. And with that knowledge, he's able to either short or buy in the right places, and makes a lot of money. He's super rich. He is a billionaire multiple times over, and he decides he wants to buy a painting of some kind as an investment. And he hires somebody to go out and find them, and the person he hires finds this painting of a shark that has become very popular because it is associated, the painter is associated with this game called Witnessed, which is kind of an online dystopian game that can be played across the world, online. This is where it gets hard. It's very hard to know how to go in and out. There are 688 pages of this. This is what I think happens. This is a spoiler. And I think this is the way it's supposed to be. The real world, as we think of it, the physical world, is this future London. These other narratives are a story that Diana Hunter made up to confound the investigators who are working with the witness to find something out from her. She has created multiple storylines that intersect and create loops, and while they're trying to figure out what's going on, she's tricking them. These characters that feel very real to us are just stories that Diana Hunter made up. We also find out that the Inspector Knife, is made up. Inspector Knife was made up by somebody named Oliver Smith, who is also, it seems, this other kind of god figure, who is trying to break Diana Hunter's mind. So he introduces this other counter narrative, which is the investigator, to go in there and root around. The investigator is rooting around, and she's seeing these memories and believing that they may be true stories, or she can't figure out why those memories are with Diana. But she also doesn't know she's also made up, because most of the story is going on in Diana's mind. But it doesn't feel that way. So at the end, we find out that Diana has basically compromised Knife, allowed Knife to see that this system, the witness system, the system in London, is corrupted and is not giving people more freedom, but actually sending into a spiral of servitude. And the corruption is invisible to most people, but she needs to expose it. Diana needs to expose it. She's not actually dead yet. She's fighting. And this entire 688-page book is really during that interrogation. We think she's dead. Knife thinks she's dead. But we only find out towards the end that she's not. That they're both, that it's still an ongoing interrogation. And Gnomon, who it seems was supposed to kill the different parts of Diana Hunter's narratives so they could break those away and get down to the very base story of Hunter so they can find out what they want to know from her. It seems like Gnomon actually switches sides and tries to kind of protect them, and he's going after, or it is going after, the Oliver Smiths of the story. But is that really what happened? Because I also think it may actually be that all of this was going on in Annabelle and her boyfriend Coulson's head, that she was trying to do something with the system that she created, and Coulson was trying to do something else. So maybe Diana Hunter doesn't even exist, and it's really Annabelle, Belicki, and Coulson, and Coulson's really acting as Oliver Smith, trying to break her, but she fights back. I don't know. I am not confident any layer of the narrative is the real world, because it's constructed in a way that every level feels real. They're all interconnected, and you can't trust anyone's point of view to be the truth. It ends with Gnomon talking to us. And it's talking about, it basically says that this book doesn't matter. The story doesn't matter. What matters is that we met Gnomon. I'm going to tell you the last two lines. So if you don't want to hear them, fast forward in a couple seconds. The last two lines: I am Gnomon. From this moment, so are you. Gnomon. I loved it. It is a book that you need to pay attention to when you're reading, because you cannot sleep through chapters of this. You cannot read this when you are already asleep or going to sleep, and you're just kind of turning pages, because you will miss stuff. And even if you don't miss stuff, you will second guess everything you're reading, every other chapter, all the way until the end of the book. And when you get to the end of the book, you will have so many questions about what was true and what wasn't true, what's real, what isn't real. And that's, I think, part of the point. It was a treat. It was a treat to read. I have read and done reviews for Nick Harkaway's first book, The Gone-Away World, which I loved, but said it was also complex. Angel Maker, which I love, but said it was also complex. And I didn't do an individual review for Tigerman, but I did mention it and discussed it a little bit in a video that also mentioned other books too. I think Nick Harkaway is the first author I've done more than 2 reviews for. And I know there are 2 more books that aren't under Nick Harkaway's name that he wrote, and I'm hoping to get those for Father's Day, maybe. And if I do, I will read those soon and do reviews for those books too. But like I've said before, Nick Harkaway is awesome. Nick Harkaway writes a complicated, complex book, and you need to give yourself time, and you need to pay attention to what you're reading. And if you do all of that, I think you will really enjoy it, and it really pays off, because it is one of those thinking books. Thanks for being here today. Again, Nick, thanks for writing this. I hope I kind of did it justice. It's just so complicated, and there's so many other things that I could say about it that I don't feel confident enough representing that this is what actually happened, because I'm not 100% sure. All I know is that we need to take away from this that this book is supposed to change you. Because that's all our lives are. Books that people can read, books that people can decipher about our lives. And we are reading in this book about multiple lives or multiple narratives. And it'll leave you with a lot of questions and a desire to talk to other people and debate it. I just don't know anybody else who's read it. So if you read this, or you have read this, please discuss it in the comments. I really want to talk to somebody about it. I want to see what other people are thinking. And I'll probably go back and watch other people's videos on BookTube just to see what other people have said too. But I think there are multiple layers to the onion for this book. And it is very hard to distill this down into a short review for BookTube. But I tried. So check it out. 5 stars, Gnomon by Nick Harkaway. What a cool cover too. Have a good one. Bye.
Mana mana. Mana mana.